Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing alright. Let me check my volume. Always check your sound. Guys, I want to thank everyone for the support that you guys have given to the channel ever since the knocking down of demonetizing of the channel. It just becomes difficult to run the channel. Rob, I saw your item and I read it on the last one. You might not have heard me read it. The fact that progressives are quoting the Kochs grossly overestimates the garbage. This study is pathetic. We would overall save 13 trillion, and you put the thing. Yeah, I read that in the last one, Rob. So I want to talk about Syria, and I want to talk about Syria within the course of about 10 minutes. I don't want to go beyond 10 minutes because I have something to do midday, and I can't necessarily have it overly take up. Oh, the thing at the bottom. The link at the bottom, there's an alternative super chat that you can click on that you can give if you wanted to give to the show. That's not a push, that's just a heads up. This morning, I couldn't sleep, like many mornings, and I think it was around 3 a.m. I got up, and I was looking for content, like I always do, and I end up on, I think to myself, I want to see what Syria was like before the war. I was curious, what was Syria like? I wanted to get this idea on prehistory and even current history of what it's like, and I ended up on a PBS documentary 2017 of an American journalist that had the opportunity to go into Syria. This is interesting. I would love this opportunity. He gets into the country and he's enamored. He's like, oh my God, they're playing American music in Damascus. Now, this was before Assad had started to take back the territory. Assad has taken back 80, 90% of the territory. And in this point, Assad, things looked bad and the government looked like it was on the verge of collapse. And he's riding through Syria shocked that people are human beings. These people are dancing. These people are singing. These people are secular. These people are at a club. These people are dancing and whatnot. What the hell is going on? There's a war. There are mortars going on outside of the hotel room. So he's very close to a war zone. Now, the thing is, from a human level, Syria is a secular city. It's a multi-religious city, multi-ethnic city. Whatever you want to think about the government itself, for all intents and purposes, they're trying to communicate a lesson or message to them. The Americans, Qataris, Saudi Arabia, and Israelis are sending forces into our country, and they are fucking up our country. We had a beautiful country once, and they're ripping this country apart. That doesn't get into this thing of government and everything else. This is purely along the lines of, we had a beautiful country once. Whatever you thought of that country, we, meaning Syrians, had a beautiful country once. They're ripping it apart. Even when you talk to people who were activists against Assad, people who have been thrown in prison, they would still take the position, it's not that we love Assad, it's the terrorists are worse. There were some of the people who lived under the terrorists. All of these people are trying to communicate to this American journalist. It's not that we love Assad per se. We loved Syria, yes. But no, we didn't necessarily want these foreign forces coming into Syria and ripping this country apart in the way that the foreign forces came into this country and ripped it apart. There was an original inception of a pushback. But let's be honest, countries intermingle in the affairs of other countries. And this idea that the United States wasn't involved in trying to take Assad out when overtly Obama had a policy of trying to take Assad out. The media doesn't seem to know that Obama had an overt policy of trying to take Assad out that seat because they seem to be enamored by this idea. Or it's one of two things. It's not so much that they're enamored by the idea. When Jake Tapper was hit with this fact from somebody who was actually there and Jake Tapper wasn't there, that we were paying for terrorists who were bloodthirsty rapists who were going to Syria, Jake Tapper was blown away by this. Why is Jake Tapper blown away by this when the expressed position of the government is to get Assad out? And they were doing by hook or by crook to do it. The media, in this case, is essentially an arm or propaganda arm of the government. When real information was coming back, even in the case of the newsman for PBS, he seemed to take the position that it was okay for the United States to say that Assad had to leave. That's an amazing position to take. When they found out that the Russian government was getting involved in this conflict and was going to back the Syrians, he said this is a worrying turn. Why is it a worrying turn? The Syrian government asked the Russian government to be a part of the process. The American government instigated itself into the affairs of another nation. And in instigating its affairs into another nation, it didn't ask. It just did. And in many respects, this idea of ISIS and everything else was in response to what America did in Iraq. We never talk about this honestly. We talk about this purely from the standpoint of America that tries to pretend as if Iraq didn't happen, pretend as if we're not in all of these other countries, like 70% of the world, pretend that this is not taking place, pretend that the trillions of dollars that we're spending on military, it doesn't necessarily adversely impact what we will spend that money on locally at home. What is the Syrian supposed to do in this situation? The person who was running a shop, tending to their families, who all of a sudden is now in a war zone, who's losing children to that war zone, and each and every one of them knows that the United States was partially responsible for allowing the war to persist itself as it went. And even people who are activists are stuck in the situation of hating Assad while at the same token supporting Assad because they understand that the terrorists are worse. I take an anti-war position, and after watching that video, it made me more strident in the position that I take. We have nothing to do with it. We should have nothing to do with it. It's very possible that that war would have been over with by now if we was not putting in weapons and resources into that country. It is also possible that you've just weakened any level of real opposition in the country because you've strengthened the hand of Assad within the country of Syria itself, because they understand that the terrorists are worse. Meaning people who are living under the terrorist regimes, the bloodthirsty, the chopping off heads and hands, the people in association and affiliation with Saudi Arabia, this shit that they spread all throughout the Middle East, backed with our weapons and our money. That the 40 kids who were in that school bus who was murdered by the weapons that was sold to it by the United States. We don't have these conversations they're talking about. Maybe we should have these conversations. Maybe we should question what we're doing in these countries, especially whether or not it is legal to be in these countries in the first place. We're creating our monsters. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I know I will say it again at some other point in the future, because it's true. We're creating our monsters. Each and every one of those people that fought into that Syrian war, each and every one of those people that's had family that's died in that war, that's been maimed in that war, coming away from that, knowing that the United States was responsible for putting in weapons and resources in the hands of terrorists that their loved ones had to go and martyr themselves to fight against. It's not that those people love Assad, it's more so they don't want to be taken over by terrorists. The media's response to this, their perspective to this, is purely one of an American perspective. And I'm saying that perspective is wrong, and that perspective is jaded. And that perspective assumes that we are not supporting terrorists, even though all evidence to the contrary is that we have been supporting terrorists. That the countries that we back, meaning Israel and Saudi Arabia, Israel itself has been outspoken in supporting the terrorists in that part of the world because they look at it as a buffer between itself, meaning the Golan Heights. I mean, all of this stuff to some degree is creating a pretext that allows us to function in that part of the world, which we never challenge the pretext, nor does the media ever challenge the pretext. And yet, it is a weird and bizarre thing where the United States says it can do whatever it wants in all of these different areas of the globe, even when they're not invited into sovereign nations. The reporter himself took on this cadence and position that it was okay for Obama to tell another leader in a foreign country that that leader needs to get the fuck out of Dodge before any of the hostilities cease. That's amazing. How does the United States have any say-so over hostilities ceasing if they don't have anything to do with hostilities? My point in this is straightforward. My point in this is to Americans. You're spending $1 trillion a year. What are you getting for all of that money? I'm talking about on the military. And wouldn't you prefer that money to be spent on you? What are other nations spending? And is it really the responsibility of the United States to police the world? Is it the responsibility of the United States to police the world? I would rather that money be used for healthcare, for roads, for a hyperloop between one end of the country to the other end of the country. I'm talking about building big fucking things that's responsive to the public itself, or big things that are to the best interests of the public, not necessarily money that's going into the hands of weapons contractors, and definitely not doing things that are going to create monsters that are going to come for us later on as religious warriors of sorts, justified by the money and support and the weapons that we've been putting into that end up getting their people killed, maimed, hurt, or injured. So I'm going to end this here because, like I said, this one had to be quick. I'm going to put the video at the bottom. It is a fascinating video to watch. It's not that I think Frontline did a horrible job per se. It's the perspective of the author. Each place that he's gone, he's getting the narrative of the people who are there saying they're terrorists who are coming to get us, and they're trying to take down our government. And whatever you want to think of the government, there are things of this government that we need, that we like, and that we want to preserve. And even among people who are opposition figures to the government, they were telling them the exact same thing. To the opposition leaders, he says, yeah, people in America think you're a token opposition. What do you say to that? What do you say about that? They say you're token opposition. They're saying this to people who've been bombed and shelled, who've been imprisoned for God knows how many years under the Assad regime. That's what they're telling this to. This is my issue with this. As I watch this, it made me more strident to be anti-war, more strident to take this position that if you're a person sitting on the moon and you were looking at what was taking place, what would you say? I would say that it seems like other countries are instigating their affairs, meddling in the affairs of Syria, and meddling to the degree where they're putting weapons and munitions, I should say money and munitions, into the hands of terrorists, knowing full well that the goal of this is to try to take down that government, and also knowing full well what is going to happen when that government is taking down Libya, where you can buy your own black slave for, I think, $400 is a good example. In no way did the failures of Obama and Clinton stop them from lurching forward to have additional failures in Syria. That should terrify you. That's under Obama. What is it like under Trump? At the very least, Trump is seen to try to pull stuff out of Syria, even though he's getting in the way of reconstruction. Yeah, I'm going to leave it here. Just the perspective of media towards these things is so jaded and so tilted that it misses that point. That the idea that the United States is paying terrorists to topple a government, you can look back in history and see these CIA operations, but for whatever reason, in real time, the Chuck Todds of the world, the Jake Tappers of the world, oblivious. All right, guys, I'm going to end this here. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the patron. Stephen Carl, I'll saw your email. I'll get back with you. Right. Saudi, Israel, Turkey, Qatar. Yes. $20 billion to terrorists for regime change in Syria. I don't know if that's the money, but I mean, if that's the exact amount. But we have been putting a ton of money into trying to get rid of Bashar al-Assad. This is the stated perspective of the United States. I don't understand why they wouldn't think they were doing it. Like, I'm always amazed that the mainstream media is always completely unaware of the shit that the United States government does behind the shadows. And I strongly suspect that they're doing this intentionally. Do some background on the 6-Day War. Yeah, it's funny. They always make the 6-Day War as if Israel was attacked. as opposed to Israel being the one that attacked. Just like with these kids, the thing that recently took place where they tried to say where Israel fucked up, murdered some Palestinian youth. There was a pushback, and then they had this kind of conflict. But yeah, I'm going to end this here. All right, guys. If you enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. What's happening, Garden Gnome? Yeah, this one was quick. It was quick, so you might have gotten a notification right up and down. All right, guys. Have a good one.